All right, so today we're going to dive deep into John Galliano.
Oh, yeah.
You guys gave us a ton of stuff on him,
A ton of stuff.
especially his Wikipedia page.
It's a wild one.
It's really interesting. It lays out his career pretty well.
Yeah, his career is it's really like a Shakespearean rise and fall and rise again.
Yeah, it's really more than just a rise and fall, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's like a rise and crash and burn and then kind of like claw your way back.
And try to make amends along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So this guy, John Galliano, starts as Juan Carlos Antonio Galliano Guillen in 1960 in Gibraltar.
Wow, what a name.
I know, right?
That's a mouthful.
So then his family moves when he is 6 years old to England.
Oh, wow. So he's...
Can you imagine being 6
Yeah.
and having to completely change your
whole world.
your whole life?
Uprooted?
Yeah. And they land in South London, and he's raised super strict Catholic.
That makes you wonder how much that upbringing played into his theatrical tendencies later on.
Right. Yeah.
In fashion.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
But even with all that, his passion for fashion was there, like, from the beginning.
Yeah, it's like destiny, you know?
Yeah.
Like, some people are just
He was meant to be.
born to do certain things.
Yeah, so he ends up studying at Central St. Martin's.
Oh, yeah, Central St. Martin's.
Which is like the Harvard
Fashion schools.
of fashion schools, yeah. And he graduates in 1984 with first-class honors.
No kid.
First-class honors.
That's nuts.
That's not messing around.
That's no joke.
Like, that's a really big deal.
Yeah, that's huge.
And his graduating collection was inspired by the French Revolution.
Oh, wow.
It was called Les Incroyables,
Les Incroyables.
which means the Incredibles in French.
I love it.
I
Like,
know.
total foreshadowing.
Yeah.
And that collection wasn't just praised by critics.
Yeah.
It was completely bought up by Browns,
Wow.
one of the most iconic boutiques in London.
What a start.
I know, right?
I mean, talk about hitting the ground running.
Oh.
For a fresh graduate?
Yeah.
That's like,
The dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's amazing.
So we have this crazy, talented guy
Yeah.
coming from, this kind of humble background,
Right.
exploding onto the scene with his very first collection.
You'd think it's all
You think?
smooth sailing from there.
It's smooth sailing from here. Wrong.
Oh, no.
He
doubt.
starts his own label in London, and guess what?
What happens?
He goes bankrupt.
Oh, no.
I know.
That's rough.
The fashion world is brutal.
It is. It's
Even for somebody with obvious genius.
cutthroat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So he needed a change.
Yeah.
A fresh start.
for sure.
So in 1989, he decides to conquer Paris.
Ooh la la.
Fashion capital of the world.
Paris in the late 80s, that must have been amazing.
Oh, no.
What a scene.
So did he just waltz in and become like an instant success?
No, not quite.
Oh.
Those first few years were tough.
Oh, really?
Yeah, really tough.
Yeah.
But he finds support from some big names.
Oh. well.
First, there's this Moroccan designer, Fakel Emmer,
Right.
based in Paris.
Okay.
He gives Galliano a place to work and a chance to showcase his designs.
So even in this crazy cutthroat world of high fashion,
Yeah,
like having a mentor or a patron can make all the difference.
it makes all the difference.
Eh.
I mean, it's all about who you know, right?
Right. Yeah. It's all about who believes in you.
Yeah.
And then comes the big guns.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Anna Wintour,
The Queen Bee.
Queen Bee of Vogue, and Sao Schlumberger, a Portuguese socialite
Ah, the Portuguese socialite.
with serious fashion clout.
They don't mess around.
No, they do not mess around.
Yeah.
Their backing gave Galliano the credibility and the money he needed to survive.
Yeah. Paris is expensive.
I'm sure.
It's not a cheap place to live.
Especially if you're trying to make it in the fashion world.
No.
Yeah, so it wasn't just pure talent that got him to the top.
Yeah.
It was connections.
Connections.
Timing,
Might be a little bit of luck.
but he had the skills to back it all up.
Yeah. Gotta have the skills.
Yeah. You can't just fake it in that world. It's
Well,
too competitive.
And things really start taking off for him in the early 90s, right?
Yeah, early 90s, things start popping off.
Yeah.
He starts dressing celebrities.
Yeah.
Kylie Minogue,
Oh, wow.
Patrick Cox, shoe designer.
So he's really getting his name out there.
Yeah, he's making a name for himself, building that momentum.
Yeah. And then Givenchy.
Here we go.
In 1995, Galliano lands the head designer spot at Givenchy.
Givenchy.
This is massive.
Huge.
He becomes the first British designer to lead a French haute couture house.
That's historic.
I know.
Haute couture?
Haute couture.
We're not talking
Ready to wear.
off the rack.
This is the highest level of
Yeah.
fashion handmade.
It's like the top of the mountain.
Exclusive
Yeah.
price tags that would make your eyes water.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
So he went from this struggling designer to the head of Givenchy.
Talk about a glow up. I know, it's like going from playing in the minor leagues to hitting a grand slam in the World Series. Yeah, and LVMH, the luxury giant that owns both brands,
Yeah.
must have seen something really special in him.
Yeah.
Because they didn't just hand him Givenchy.
Right.
A year later, in 1996, he gets scooped up to replace Gianfranco Ferré at Dior.
Dior?
Dior at that time was like the crown jewel.
The crown jewel, yeah.
And at Dior, Galliano unleashes his full creative power.
It's on.
It's game on.
Yeah, no holding back.
His shows become these theatrical spectacles.
Oh, yeah.
His designs are groundbreaking. The critics are eating it up.
I bet.
Do you remember that chartreuse gown Nicole Kidman wore to the Oscars in 1997?
Oh, yeah. How could you forget that?
Pure Galliano.
Bold, dramatic, unforgettable.
Yeah.
Classic Galliano.
But even with all this success, there were cracks starting to show.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh.
His personal life was getting messy, fueled by addiction.
Sadly, a common story in those circles.
And it's going to lead to a very dark chapter in his story.
Right, because 2011, everything comes crashing down.
A video surfaces of Galliano making anti-Semitic remarks in a Paris bar.
Oh, man.
And the backlash is immediate.
Yeah.
And brutal.
And rightly so.
He's fired from Dior, condemned by the industry and the public.
Yeah.
Basically becomes an outcast overnight.
Yeah, you can't just say stuff like that.
It's total fall from grace.
It is.
A reminder that even the most talented people can be destroyed by their own actions.
Absolutely. Actions have consequences.
Yeah.
Words have power.
So it's a really complex situation, raises a lot of questions about accountability.
Right.
The consequences of hate speech.
Yeah.
The possibility of redemption. And that's what we'll be getting into next time.
Yeah. Stick around.
Yeah. Galliano's story
It's not over.
doesn't end there. He's going to try to make a comeback.
Yeah.
But the road to redemption is a long and difficult one.
Oh, it's going to be tough.
So make sure to join us for part 2 of this deep dive.
It's going to be a wild ride. So we left off with Galliano's world basically imploding after that anti-Semitic rant.
Yeah, it was like watching a train wreck in slow motion.
It was a harsh lesson that words have power, you know.
Especially for someone as famous as him.
Yeah, his whole career went up in flames.
And the fashion world, they didn't hesitate.
No, they were like,
He was out of Dior. His name was Mud.
done.
His career looked completely finished.
There were a lot of people saying he should be banned from fashion forever.
Really?
Yeah, some people felt like his talent couldn't erase what he did.
It's a tough question.
It is. Yeah, it's interesting to think about. This was before all the debates about cancel culture really took off.
Right, yeah.
It was a different time.
So he kind of became this, like, early example.
Yeah, a precursor to the whole cancel culture phenomenon.
But he didn't just vanish completely, did he?
No, he did.
His Wikipedia page mentions that he spent some time at Oscar de la Renta's studio.
Right, in 2013.
Okay.
Oscar de la Renta, a legend in the fashion world.
Yeah, known for his elegance and class.
Exactly. He gave Galliano a temporary spot in his studio.
That's pretty surprising given how bad the backlash was.
It was, yeah, I mean, it was a huge risk for De La Renta.
So some people were willing to give him another chance even then.
Yeah, Anna Wintour was a key figure in that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she'd been a big supporter of Galliano for years.
Okay, good.
She believed in his talent and thought he deserved a path back.
A path back
The
to...
redemption to the fashion world, but only after real atonement.
Okay, so he wasn't actually designing his own collections there at De La Renta's studio?
Oh, no, he was working behind the scenes more like an apprentice.
Just kind of learning and observing?
Yeah, he helped De La Renta with the fall 2013 ready-to-wear collection,
Okay.
but he stayed backstage during the show.
Oh, so no, like, big public appearance?
Not yet, no.
I bet people had very mixed feelings about him being back in the fashion world at all.
Oh, absolutely. Some people were furious. They thought his actions were unforgivable. Others were cautiously hopeful, you know, maybe thinking he'd learned his lesson and was truly sorry.
So did Galliano ever, like, publicly address what happened during this time?
He did. In June 2013, he gave his first TV interview since the scandal.
Wow.
He talked about his addiction, how sorry he was, and wanting to create again.
So basically saying...
I messed up badly, but I'm working on myself and hoping for another chance.
And then comes Maison Margiela,
Right.
which seems like a huge shift from the glamour of Dior.
Huge shift in 2014. Galliano becomes the creative director of Maison Margiela.
Maison Margiela.
It's a French fashion house known for its avant-garde deconstructed style.
Okay, very different.
Very different, and they value anonymity.
Anonymity.
Yeah, it's about the clothes, not the designer.
Wow, that's fascinating.
It was a surprising move for both Galliano and the brand.
What was the reaction to this?
Mixed bag. Some critics thought it was way too soon for Galliano to be back in such an influential position.
Yeah, I could see that.
Others thought it was a perfect fit. His theatrical style and pushing boundaries seemed right for Margiella's unconventional approach.
Okay, so kind of like a match made in heaven in a way.
In a way, yeah.
So how did his work at Maison Margiela reflect everything that had happened?
It's interesting because at Margiela, the designer is usually hidden, you know.
Right, it's about the clothes.
Yeah, but you could still see Galliano's influence.
Really?
Yeah, he brought a new level of drama and theatricality to the brand while still respecting their core values of deconstruction and conceptual design.
So he found a way to express himself creatively,
Yeah.
but within a more restrained environment.
Exactly.
Was his work at Margiela critically acclaimed?
Yeah, for the most part, it was well received.
Okay.
Critics liked his creativity and how he reinterpreted Margiela's style in a fresh and exciting way.
So he was able to kind of bring something new?
He did, yeah. There were still some people who didn't like it, but overall it seemed like he was slowly rebuilding his reputation as a designer.
Okay, so we have Galliano attempting a comeback, finding a new home at Maison Margiela,
Right.
and getting positive feedback for his work.
It's a new chapter.
But does his story end there?
It doesn't. But before we jump into the later years of his career, it's worth pausing and considering.
Okay.
What do you think about Galliano's attempt at redemption?
That's a great question for our listener to think about.
Yeah. Do you think incredible talent can excuse terrible behavior?
We'll pick up John Galliano's story in the last part of this deep dive.
We'll explore his later years at Maison Margiela and the impact of his complicated legacy.
So make sure to stick around for part 3. Okay, so we're back,
Back for round 3.
ready to finish up our deep dive into the world of John Galliano.
The saga continues.
You know, as we've been talking about his journey, it really hits you.
Yeah.
How much his story reflects like the craziness of the fashion industry itself.
Oh, absolutely. It's a wild world.
You have this constant clash between art and money,
Right.
between breaking the rules and playing it safe.
And pushing boundaries constantly.
Yeah. And Galliano, he's always been someone who pushes those boundaries.
Yeah. For better or worse,
Not just in his designs, but in his personal life, too.
unfortunately.
Yeah. So let's talk about his later years at Maison Margiela.
Okay.
His Wikipedia page doesn't give a ton of detail about like specific collections,
Yeah, it's pretty vague on that.
but it does say that he stopped using fur in his designs in 2018.
Yeah, that was a big deal.
That was a big statement.
He talked about meeting with Penelope Cruz and Dan Matthews from PETA
Oh, wow.
and how it changed his whole view on using fur.
Okay.
It was a public statement that really lined up with this growing movement in fashion
Right.
towards more ethical and sustainable practices.
So even with all the controversy swirling around him, he was still plugged into these important conversations happening in the fashion world.
Yeah, he was still engaged and evolving.
Did he keep getting recognized for his work at Margiela?
It's tricky, you know, because Margiela is all about anonymity,
Right.
letting the clothes speak for themselves.
But Galliano's talent is so obvious.
Yeah, it's hard to hide that kind of talent.
His influence on the brand was clear to see.
Some critics loved how he blended Margiela's signature deconstructed style with his own dramatic flair.
Right.
Others felt like he was taking over the brand's identity.
It's that push and pull again.
Yeah, that tension between the individual and the collective.
And then in 2018, he launches Mutiny, his first perfume for the fashion house.
Oh, yeah, Mutiny. That was a bold move.
Perfume is huge in the fashion industry.
It's huge.
It's often how designers express something really personal.
It's like their signature scent.
Mutiny was supposed to reflect Galliano's take on the Maison Margiela woman.
Strong, independent, rebellious.
I wonder if he meant something more with the name Mutiny,
Yeah.
given his own history of rebellion and all the backlash he faced.
It's definitely open to interpretation.
Yeah.
But name aside, the perfume itself was a hit.
Really?
Yeah, people loved its complex and unconventional scent.
So it seemed like he was finding his footing again,
Yeah.
both creatively and commercially.
He was back in the game.
So here we are in 2024, and John Galliano is still the creative director of Maison Margiela.
It's been quite a journey.
It's been over a decade since that infamous incident,
Yeah,
and his career has had some wild twists and turns.
more than most.
I guess the big question is, has he truly redeemed himself?
That's a question each person has to answer for themselves.
Right.
He's apologized for what he did, he's gotten sheepment, and he's kept creating work that challenges and inspires.
But what he did is still there,
It is.
and some people will never forgive him.
And that's okay.
It's important to remember that redemption isn't a finish line. It's a journey,
It's a process.
and it's often messy and imperfect.
Yeah. There are no easy answers.
And in Galliano's case, it's all played out in the public eye.
Yeah, the whole world was watching.
He's become this symbol of how the fashion industry is willing to forgive.
And how obsessed it is with talent, no matter how flawed the person might be.
Well, this has been a fascinating trip through the world of John Galliano.
It really has.
We've covered his early talent, his meteoric rise, his shocking fall.
And his attempts to make amends and rebuild his career.
It's a story that really makes you think about creativity,
Accountability.
the nature of forgiveness.
And second chances.
Yeah, and I think the big takeaway for our listener is that John Galliano's story isn't over.
He's still designing, provoking, and challenging how we see what's acceptable.
And what's possible in the fashion world.
Exactly.
So we encourage you to keep exploring his work. Make up your own mind about his legacy.
And think about the bigger questions his story raises.
About talent redemption and second chances.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.